Hello, YouTube family. I speak a lot about how great writers are great readers, and I do once in a while highlight great reads from across the diaspora. I was very excited to come across this one, the publication by the world famous Chimamanda Adichie, who published 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿 after a 10-year hiatus. I've read all her books, and I was thrilled to see this come to print. And so to make this even more special, I got a group of friends, my book club friends, and we all got together to discuss this book. I'm so excited, and I want to introduce you to my friends who are joining me for this discussion. First is DJ, and then Vanessa, and Nyasha, and Manny. Carmen was not able to join on video, but she was present on audio and texting. And then last but not least, I want to introduce you to my friend Rudo, who is an amazing author herself. She publishes under the name Alice Takawira, and I'd love for you to check out her book that you see here, highlighted here.
Thank you everybody for joining me. I'm so glad we have this opportunity to review 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿. So lovely to see you ladies. I want to start by asking about characters. Can you all just go around, tell me your favorite characters and just very concisely, and people you did, and maybe the best, your favorite and the one you didn't really care much for. Maybe DJ?
Sure. I liked 𝐾𝐭. Is that how you guys would pronounce it?
Yes, that's perfect. Exactly how it looks is how the names are pronounced.
And I think I liked her because I sympathized with her character. While I couldn't necessarily relate to some of her decision making, I could sympathize with her character and her situation, right? She was very, I would say, like, misled.
Yes.
One thing I'd like to preface all of it is we noticed that these are all characters, women, and 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿 being a play on the word body count. So it's very much their decisions with the men in their lives, and ultimately how those men and those decisions have truly shaped the trajectory of their young adult, and because in their 30s, but their adult lives. For whatever reason, I felt really connected to 𝐾𝐭, but I think what I liked the most about learning about her character, she thought her mother was this tyrant or this very hard and mean woman. And then she gets to adulthood as a mother and learns who her mother was as a woman. And we saw that in some other books that we talked about, but I'll keep my answer concise. So her character and her ability to see her mother as a woman through her own motherhood experience, and thinking that her mother was such a tyrant and so whatever, but her mother was like, my ticket is open-ended. I'm here until to help you with this baby. That warmed my heart. So maybe it's her mother is actually the character I like the most.
Yes.
𝐾𝐭's story is really what, because I was so saddened about the dynamics, right? That this guy wasn't like some low-class guy, but he treated her like that. And the whole dynamics, like, blocking her, and she's told him that she's having his baby and he has nothing to do, like, and it wasn't like they weren't in a relationship. So it was, that whole story just really touched my heart. But I loved her revelation with her mother, is what I mean.
Yes. Give grace to our parents, right? We only learn as we get older. How about Nyasha? Any thoughts about maybe your worst or favorite if it's different from 𝐾𝐭?
So my favorite has to be 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐿, because I felt that out of all of the characters, she had a story. The rest of the characters, I guess, were just pretty much living their lives. I felt like, it's just, okay, it's COVID and but 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐿, I felt she really had a story that I actually wish she had just written a book about 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐿. And I know that it's influenced by that, by the story of that maid that was sexually assaulted by someone. By someone, I can't remember.
In New York, yes. Some top shot, some big shot.
So 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐿's story, and I like what I like about her is that she was the underdog, wasn't she? She always felt like she didn't have a voice. Her sister was a bit more of a stronger character. She admired her sister. She was the good girl out of the family. She did what her parents asked her to do. And, just by fortune and luck, I guess, she ended up in America, quite naive, very innocent. And I just like that she wrote her story very well and just portrayed the level. I wouldn't say maybe the level of intelligence, but I think she just portrayed the level of the level of reasoning of the person of her background.
Yes.
And I felt that with that character, it really came through very, very well. Maybe it's because, I don't know, it's just very different from my background, but I understood her story. Although I can't relate to it, I understood her story and I enjoyed it a bit more. 𝐾𝐿, I had read it before. I think I've said this before. So I'd read it in a short story. So it felt like I was just reading the same book twice. So I definitely preferred 𝐾𝐸𝐻𝐿.
Loved her. I learned so much about her part of Africa that I'm not familiar with in just reading her story. How about Vanessa?
I like
recording in progress.
I'm not sure, I don't know if I'm feedbacking, but anyway, so I liked Chiamaka actually. I actually liked the opening sentence when she talked about, I've always wanted to be known.
Yes.
That really resonated. I think on a personal level, even like the whole relationship situation, I could relate to some of the poor choices, trying to find that thing. It made me kind of think in a way, because she had one really good relationship. And you kind of think, okay, sometimes do we then make choices looking for the 10 out of 10 when an 8 out of 10 is great? So how do we then lose out, and what does that mean to us for how our life, the choices we make and how our life turns up in the end? So yeah, I could sort of feel the thing about searching for something, searching for that person whilst trying to find yourself. I think there are elements about her, maybe her own agency in terms of what she wanted to do, that I would have liked for it to be stronger than it was. But I like just the friendships, having like the whole women group and friendship, being able to see other people. Because if we were talking about, Nyasha was talking about Kia, what's her name? Let me not butcher her name.
Is it 𝐾𝐸𝐻𝐿?
Yeah, 𝐾𝐸𝐻𝐿, because she's for her in the hotel. So I think like there's something about her and seeing people despite of what they are or where they're from, just also kind of really relating and engaging with people that are the character. One I didn't quite connect with was Omeloga. So I think like I found it, I don't know if it was too dramatic. Some of the things I was like, are these things really happening? The elements of her, maybe from a moral sense as well, that just couldn't relate to, but I was also interested in being exposed to them.
I like that, being interested in being exposed to them. That's a very interesting perspective. I found Omelogo exhausting, very finicky. She was just tiring, but I think there are people like that, just hovering and observing the world and not conforming in any direction whatsoever. I found Chiamaka and 𝐾𝐸𝐻𝐿's friendship to be a rather unlikely friendship. Just very different socioeconomically and in many respects. And yet they found this sisterly bond that was very moving, how they became her fiercest advocate through her troubles. And I think it brings me to themes in the book, the themes of immigration. And Chimamanda writes a lot about different stories of immigration, because to the unread, to the untraveled, this is often a common story of immigration. People who are poor, have nothing to eat, trying to find their way to the US. But it's not always like that. There's so many different stories. So that's one theme. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that theme of different immigrant stories that we see in this book.
I'm glad you said that, because one of the things I was thinking about in preparing for this, as I summarized 𝐾𝐸𝐻𝐿, I thought of her character as, why is it that the poor maid is the one that has this tragedy that happens to her, right? She's happy and content in her life. No one deserves this, but it's almost back to them. And then the way that the whole framing of her story is set up, that her language barriers, things in terms of, which to your point, we think of immigration and we think of education as hand in hand, right? There is, I'm an immigrant because I went to study abroad, or I'm an immigrant because I went to take this job after university to go X, Y, and Z. But then we think of, to your point, I think that more common story that's fed to the masses is the immigrant trying to make something from nothing, and not having anything. So with 𝐶𝐴𝐵𝐵𝐴, she was lacking in an understanding and comprehension standpoint. So it's kind of like this character is painted as, because she's poor and uneducated, this happens to her. Where I challenge that, because I don't think that things happen because someone is necessarily poor and uneducated, or our circumstances that will predictate certain outcomes because of that. But I wanted, to me, it seemed a bit more of a trope, is what I mean. Like, it seemed like, okay, that's expected. Like, why does this have to happen to the poor maid? So.
Right. Although a predator or vicious person may tend to go after a weaker person who has less power, less of a voice, less of a standing to fight, isn't it? Yeah. So
and in an immigrant situation with a language barrier, so there is less language, I guess, to be able to express what has happened, because that's what she really struggled with, right? Expressing what actually happened in the scene. And then for 𝐶𝐴𝐵𝐵𝐴, trying to explain the situation to all those lawyers who, so she felt attacked, didn't she? Even by her own lawyers, but they're trying to understand her situation. But because of her background and the language barrier, she couldn't really understand what story whether they're actually defending her or attacking her. So I think the language barrier definitely isn't, I don't know whether it's a theme, but maybe it's something in the immigrant story that having different language impacts maybe your communication and how you're associated in the community you're living in, right?
True. Definitely. I think another important theme has to do with societal expectations. That's huge, isn't it? The woman is supposed to have it all together, be married at a certain time. So 𝐾𝐿 is bawling, crying her eyes out because she's almost 30 and she's not married, and how it pushes young women into making less ideal decisions because they're kind of under this heavy burden of what society expects them to do. Do you have any thoughts about it?
So before we go to that theme, is it okay if we just go back to the story of 𝐶𝐴𝐵𝐵𝐴 and what DJ was talking about? What I also find interesting about that story and the immigrant story that you mentioned was how what I found interesting actually was how, even though, was it Omologo? How do you pronounce the name?
Omologo, exactly.
Omologo, even though she was quite exhausting. But I think through Omologo and through 𝐶𝐴𝐵𝐵𝐴, Chimamanda does this brilliant thing of showing that social inequalities, whether in the West or whether in Africa, are just at the same level. In Africa, it just seems, because when Omologo is talking about those women that she when she starts that whole Robin Hood company.
That's right.
From the bank, so she can support the women's businesses in the village.
Right.
I don't remember what she called it. What did she call it? She had a term for it, didn't she?
She said Robin Hood something, I think. There was some sort of grant.
Yeah, some sort of grant, the Robin Hood grant or something like that. Yeah. But that equates to social inequalities, right? Social inequalities in Africa, and then you think, okay, you go to America, there isn't supposed to be all these social inequalities. Everything's supposed to be fair, and then we meet 𝐶𝐴𝐵𝐵𝐴, and yes, she is very grateful of her life. But when you then look at the experiences she has with the justice system, you then see the social inequalities exposed, right? So I think through those two characters, she sort of compares social inequalities in the West and social inequalities in Africa, and just showing that, you know what, wherever you are, if you even in the West, where they try to sell you the American dream and that justice is for everyone, right? Justice is for everyone. It's really not if you don't have power and if you don't have I guess if you don't have wealth. And if you don't have the education, because at the end of the day, education is wealth. Education and language is wealth, right? So it's really the same. The theme is the same, whether you're in Africa, whether whether in the developed country. Social inequalities are there. It's just that in Africa, it's more exposed.
That's right. True.
Yeah,
It's really a place that doesn't have its own kind of unfairness. There's probably no such place. Any other comments about themes? Thanks, Nyasha. Be it societal expectations or anything else you read. I'm trying to think about other things in the book. The men are uniformly painted not so great in this book. Chimamanda was not really out here to tell us about the good men in this book. I'm not sure why she decided to do it, because the world is full of good men, but it wasn't the story here.
No, it definitely wasn't.
She did portray Chiamaka's dad as a good man.
Okay. But the younger generation, no.
Not as much. But I just wanted to touch on the societal expectations, especially where it pertains to women. Because it was a running theme about even from the Chiamaka end, like all the aunties, all the family, everybody's asking, when are you getting married? And also the where we have the pressures of our bodies as women, like our bodies as women, and that window of having children, and how do you balance out with the pressures that you have in the world and the realities of what's actually happening in your body as a woman. And one of the themes she also spoken a lot was women's health issues, like whether it's the fibroids, the whole experience really highlight what it is like for women. So that was also interesting to see, because you don't tend to maybe get that as so much as in really clearly put out there. So I think like those were some of the themes that came out, and just really when we think about what we're doing in life as women, there's just so many things that are coming at us, and what that then informs in how we, again, back to the thing about the choices we make. The men staying in a long relationship, 3+ years, but you're in a good for nothing relationship that you're clearly seeing is not going anywhere. So the men weren't portrayed too greatly. But I think it's a bit, not everyone is like that. Not everyone is like that.
That's true. DJ, go ahead.
No, I was going to just kind of comment. You made me think of something, Bansai, when I was thinking of Uche's comment about the men were not portrayed as good characters. But to me, it just seemed like the backdrop, like we're getting the men that weren't good characters because these women were making poor decisions. So I didn't take it like it's this world painted of bad men. We're seeing the bad men because of the poor decisions. To your point, there are lots of great men that she could talk about, but what you get is, with Chiamaka, like the married man, that moment you realize, and he told you, that's the end. That's it. You had a moment, you had a great connection in dating, but he told you he was married. That is where you cut it off. You didn't know up until then. You can be blissfully ignorant. Once you know, now you're making an intentional bad decision. So that, and even with Darnell, I was like, he was a jerk from the beginning. People around her could see he was a jerk, and he would belittle her, but he was very insecure, and he couldn't fathom a life that was built on something so frivolous as travel writing. You need to be more serious, right? And I'm sure she came from a similar family background, but had the ability, because of her family background, to choose travel writing. So, I liked some aspects of the characters, but I think we're getting the decisions or the backdrop of, what women are expected in society. That they just seem to go awry with how they make decisions, right? Because no one would have said, "Oh, stay with Darnell," because nobody would have said that. Nobody would have said, "Oh, I can't even remember the European guy," but he clearly didn't even live in the same city while he was visiting her. And then the same with 𝐬𝐿𝐵, with the guy. I mean, that one kind of was surprising how that turned out, but nonetheless, poor decisions, and her deciding to stop taking her birth control, but not being very clear with him on what that outcome was going to be. So
true. And thank you, Rudo. We can see you. I actually wanted to ask Rudo, we're talking about societal expectations. And I just remembered this guy whose name I can't recall, who dated Chiamaka, who proposed to her and she turned him down. The one who wanted to honor her. And some of all those ridiculous aspects. I mean, when I was reading that part, I was rolling my eyes. I thought my eyes were going to fall out of my head. But, how marrying you is to honor you, what did you think about all that? The one, and she put humor, how everybody is baby. I was just laughing so hard. She said baby at a party and all the women looked, What did you think? Do you remember that guy, Rudo? Any thoughts about him? We cannot hear you. I can see you speaking, but volume maybe? Oh, you're trying your phone. Oh, okay. Well, while Rudo tries to get connected, anybody have any thoughts about that guy? We have 9 minutes to go on this platform, so we'll try to keep answers short.
I thought it was a bit chauvinistic. Like, it sounds nice to say that you want to marry her, but it seems like, oh, you fit the image. It's the right thing to do. Like, not that there's this real connection. And she was, bless her heart, she was completely bored with this guy.
Right.
Like, she would talk about countries and he's just sitting there blankly like, are you hungry? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was a simple relationship that she might appreciate when she's older. But where she is now, that's not the guy. That wasn't the guy for her. And you know what? We can look at it that way. We can also look at it like, here she was going against the grain with what societal norms were. Because we're in this, I have to be married, I have to do this by a certain age. We would have married him, but she didn't. Now, we get to see that she picks some really poor choices after him. But, she did have that as an option if we were truly talking about just going with society's expectation.
Right.
Not that much of the time.
Right. Like, that's the guy her parents would totally have been happy for her to marry, but she just couldn't, I can't feel, like the kids would say. I just can't do this one. Any other thoughts about sort of themes in the book? Anything that you thought about as you read through the book?
Hi, everyone. Sorry
hi, I can hear you, Rudo. Yeah, you want to tell us about themes in the book? We've talked about societal expectations. We talked about the different stories of immigration, which Chimamanda writes about a lot. It's enlightening for people who are the unread, the untraveled to know. So that's one theme. But anything else that you thought was a theme in the book worthy of discussion?
First of all, Chimamanda is a brilliant writer. Like, it's just the way she can, put you in a place like Nigeria or where's that 𝐾𝐨𝐺'𝐿 from, by the way? Cameroon or Senegal? Can't remember.
Guinea, right?
Guinea. Yeah. It was very well done, right? But when I just wanted to throw that in there. Themes, there were so many things going on in that book. It was a lot. So I want to say one that stuck out would be the immigrant experience. As always, I think that's one of her strongest punches, because she's done that with Americana, where she's talking about different aspects of immigration. Like, we see immigrants from different points of view. We see the affluent immigrant, Chiamaka. We see 𝐾𝐨𝐺'𝐿, the less fortunate one. And we realize that we all have something in common, regardless of where we're coming from, whether you're coming from Nigeria, from Guinea. When you come to America, we all sort of end up experiencing the same discrimination. Chiamaka had issues where people, when I like the guy who liked her hair and says, I like the cornrows. She was this black beauty masterpiece that he just wanted to hang with. Was it Luke? One of her guys.
Yes.
There were so many racial undertones because she dated outside her race. She dated outside her race quite a lot. She was very open to everything from Arab guys to to European, Kenyan, whatever, right? Then you have 𝐾𝐨𝐺'𝐿 facing it from another element as well. And then 𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐻, always ready to pick out on all the nuances. Like, she was the voice for the things that we as immigrants think but never say. So 𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐻 served the purpose of saying those things that we can never say in public. When you're in America, you can't criticize this, because, you know, you always feel like you're a visitor, you're a guest in someone's country, so you have to be respectful. But 𝐼𝐼𝐺𝐵 just kind of sharpshooting. So I think that the theme here was immigrant experiences from different perspectives. And I feel like it's really Chimamanda's way of letting us know what her perspectives are, because there was a lot of her opinion through these characters on so many things that we as immigrants pick out, our differences, our similarities. And I like how a lot of times she may criticize something about America and the American people, but she never shied away from doing the same for Nigeria. Like she would point out that, well, yeah, in Nigeria, this happens too, and, you know, kind of weigh it out. And again, she would use 𝐼𝐼𝐺𝐵 as the bridge, because 𝐼𝐼𝐺𝐵 had this fantastic life in Nigeria and did not like being in the West. And Chiamaka didn't get Nigeria. Like, she criticized Lagos, and, you know, and she loved the charming life she had in the West. So we got to experience those points of views. And I think it's just showing the different immigrant experience, I guess.
It's very well put. I mean, she's a fabulous author. I have read all her books, and I see her growing up in writing. I see the protagonist getting older. If you know Purple Hibiscus, that was teenage level, right? If you go to Americana, was a little young adult, 20s. And it's just so refreshing to see how her protagonists are getting older. Now we're talking 30s and 40s. But something never changes, how she always pulls in history into her book. And it's just so important to pull in history. I talk to people about writing biographies, how you got to pull in history, because it anchors your story. It helps it be more believable. You start to see the people as real people in a real world, like COVID, like sad things, World War II, you know, massacres and things like that she pulls into her story. We have 3 minutes on this platform, but I wondered if somebody can tell me what they thought about pulling in history, the things she pulled into this story. Can you hear me, Manny? Manny can see us. Oh, she can hear us. Okay, good.
I can hear you now.
Okay, fabulous. Manny, you want to tell us what you thought about how she pulled in some history into her story in about 2 minutes?
Yeah, maybe I can try. I think it's always nice to have a background of what is happening in the world. If someone is telling you a story, I think it gives you a context, perhaps, because sometimes if somebody just tells you something out of context of a historical period, then you may think the way they've reacted to something perhaps is just OTT, or you probably think, why would anybody do that? But I suppose if it's put in a context, sometimes it's easy for you to understand people's behaviors, people's reactions to things, and yeah, that's what I think.
Fabulous. Any other thoughts about this book?
Can I just add real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm going to have to hop onto another online conference. Talking about historical events, and I feel like she did a brilliant thing of using historical events that happened as a way of letting you know what period we're in without actually telling you. So I actually had to go back and do some research, like, oh wait, where is this? Oh, when did the Pope die? 2013. Okay, so we're in 2013. Great. And she talked about that Guinea, there's a Guinea Amado. She actually used the same name, the boy that was killed by the cops.
Yes.
And that was like, oh, 1993. Okay, that was way before the Black Lives Matter movement. But again, I went back to look at that. I had to like Google a lot of stuff, and I found it very interesting how she has an amazing way of letting you go and do some homework. Like you're gonna read some stuff up. So yeah, that was pretty interesting to note that she didn't tell you what year it was, but you had to go figure it out. Unless you already know all of that stuff, right? Like, you know, good for you.
Exactly.
I did like the infusion of yellow. I knew that story. So yeah, that was
fabulous discussion, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me.